I'm unfortunately completely serious when I say that I experience and take this as a direct threat of physical violence against the LGBTQ community.
Ron DeSantis and the Trump administration just trolled LGBT activists in Florida, and they are not coping well. We're going to break this all down and so much more on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, our media, and our politics, all from an independent perspective. Up first, guys, like I've mentioned, we've got to check in on Florida, my new home state where I recently moved to Miami. By the way, guys, I'm working on my lighting setup. It's kind of in an experimental phase at the moment, so don't judge me too harshly based on how I have things set up for today. But anyway, Florida. I moved here recently in Miami. I generally think Ron DeSantis is a very effective governor, even if I don't always agree with him about everything, and that Florida is a pretty great place to live under his time in office. However, this is really making waves, something he just did in partnership with the Trump administration's Department of Transportation, where they, in the middle of the night, painted over a rainbow crosswalk in Orlando that commemorated the victims of the Pulse nightclub shooting, infamous mass shooting that occurred at a gay nightclub a few years ago. Let's catch up on this story with some reporting from CBS News.
Florida has started enforcing a new initiative by the Trump administration's Department of Transportation. Secretary Sean Duffy directed the nation's governors to identify what he called safety improvements, including any political messages or artwork that could be distracting to drivers. CBS's Christian Benavidez is in Delray Beach, where colorful crosswalks are now in the state's crosshairs.
This is one of many rainbow crosswalks across the Sunshine State, Eureka. Several municipalities have received letters from the Florida Department of Transportation demanding they paint over the art or face funding cuts.
In Florida, rainbow crosswalks are being removed, including outside Orlando's Pulse nightclub, honoring the 49 people gunned down in the 2017 mass shooting targeting the LGBTQ community. The Florida Department of Transportation, the same agency that first painted the art, erased it.
It's sad that they do this because this has been here from the day one.
Florida says it's following a new federal directive from the Trump administration to keep crosswalks and intersections free from distractions.
Safety can never be used as a cover for intolerance.
Alex Fernandez is a Miami Beach city commissioner.
It is, in fact, safer than some of our other crosswalks on Ocean Drive. And that's the irony here.
In a study, Bloomberg Philanthropies also found colors and designs in intersections decreased crashes by more than 50%.
Thank you.
There's been loud and swift backlash to the removals.
So, as you can imagine, on an issue this politically charged and controversial, LGBT activists online are responding in a way that is perfectly rational and normal. Just kidding. Here is one interesting video I discovered that is only slightly more unhinged than the general tenor of the TikTok discourse on this news development. Take a listen.
I'm unfortunately completely serious when I say that I experience and take this as a direct threat of physical violence against the LGBTQ community. Like, it really is that serious. Like, it actually really, really is. This is where 49 members of our community got killed, shot, and we can't even mourn our dead. We can't even have, like, a symbol of what happened. Like, it's really, really sick, and it is that serious. It really, really is. And I think that we all need to, like, lock in on that.
Okay, so I'll hold your hand here. It is not, in fact, a threat of violence that they painted over a rainbow crosswalk. You need to calm down. It's not the end of the world, and nobody is going to physically harm you because of this development. Yikes, guys. Yikes. I'm going to give you my take on all of this chaos, which might surprise you a little bit, and we'll get into it after this. Bitcoin's value has been growing for years, but getting started can feel daunting. The good news is that today's sponsor, Coinbits, makes it as simple as grabbing your morning cup of coffee. With roundups, all you have to do is link your cards and accounts to Coinbits, and every time you buy something, they'll round up your purchase to the nearest dollar and invest that spare change into Bitcoin for you. It's that easy. No complicated setup, just set it and let it grow. It only takes 3 minutes to sign up, and you can watch your Bitcoin investments grow without a noticeable impact to your budget. Plus, your Bitcoin is truly yours and can be withdrawn to your wallet at any time. And Coinbits is proudly family-owned, based right here in America, and offers top-tier customer support. So if you're ready to start stacking Bitcoin effortlessly, go to coinbits.app/Brad and get started today. That's the link on screen or linked in the description. Just a quick disclaimer, this is not financial advice, and always remember to do your own research. And now let's get back to the show. Okay guys, so a few more pieces of information about this development before I get into my take on it all. One is that we've now got in Orlando this kind of silly standoff where the Florida Highway Patrol are monitoring the former Pulse Memorial Crosswalk after the second repainting it. So they keep going back and forth in terms of them chalking it or trying to repaint it, and then the Florida Department of Transportation coming in and clearing it out again. So glad to see that we're all super serious and we're all focused on the things that truly matter. But guys, my first point here is that I don't accept the notion that both Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy and Governor Ron DeSantis have suggested that this is about safety. For one, there is no evidence that, for example, in Orlando, this particular crosswalk has caused any safety issues in the time that it's been installed. Many years now, actually, since 2017, I believe. So the idea that this is like an urgent safety issue seems nonsensical to me. It's about the politics here. So just be honest about that. You want to get rid of these because you think Rainbow is inherently political and that there should be no such thing on city roadways and crosswalks and intersections. Let's have that debate, but don't gaslight us and tell us it's about safety. Because in fact, the research and evidence that we do have actually suggests that on the margins, colorful crosswalks and other such things may increase safety by causing people to slow down, by increasing the visibility, by making people notice it more. So if anything, the safety argument does not cut the way that DeSantis and the Trump administration are suggesting it. And it's not about that. So let's just be honest what it's really about. I also think there's a consistency issue here. Are we really going to do this? Are we going to get rid of all political? And I agree that the pride colors are political, but are we really going to get rid of all political decorations and paintings on roads, including, for example, this one in Tampa that's back the blue that is covering the whole street? I certainly think that if you're going to go down this path, you have to enforce it consistently. And I'm not sure DeSantis is going to want to be known as the governor who had to paint over all the back the blue memorials in Florida, in streets and crosswalks and what have you. I don't know, but if you're going to do this kind of thing, you have to enforce it consistently. Otherwise, you really do lend credence to the accusations that it's motivated by bigotry or animus, which I'm open to the idea that it's not, but I have to say, going after the Pulse Memorial is just, it's in really poor taste and can only be defended if you're going to be extremely consistent and remove everything. Because again, this is just not causing any problems. And it's something that was dear to a lot of people in a community that experienced a tragedy. And to me, it kind of feels like the administration and Governor DeSantis are almost doing the opposite of virtue signaling, or like Republican virtue signaling. They're going after something that's going to make no difference. This will not improve safety. That's totally silly. But they're trying to show how anti-woke they are. And they're almost... And it's really helping no one, but upsetting and distressing survivors of the shooting, that local community, their families, upsetting them, all just to kind of create a headline showing, look how much we're doing to stamp out woke. And as concerned as I am about a lot of the woke ideology that's infiltrated our institutions and taken over the culture in this country, I don't really think that rainbow memorials for nightclub shooting victims are the problem. And I actually think that when you take it this far and you go after these kinds of things, especially if you do so in a selective manner, that you overreach, you overplay your hand, and this is going to rub a lot of people the wrong way. It really is, well, essentially accomplishing nothing. Because again, guys, reading from the Washington Post here, Art painted on crosswalks makes streets safer, group says. People drive slower and are more alert at crosswalks decorated with murals, study finds. And the state of North Carolina, a red state, their Department of Research and Development found that yielding compliance at high visibility crosswalks, like a Pride crosswalk, was actually higher. So reading here, a comparative analysis of the before-after dataset found that on average, driver yielding increased by 22% at sites that were converted to high visibility crosswalks, which was a statistically significant difference from the change in yield rate observed at the sites where the crosswalk remained the same. So on the margins, they may actually be making these local communities less safe to score points in the culture war. If you ask me, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And in fact, conservatives and Republicans over the years have often cried foul when people, especially Democratic administrations, have tried to leverage federal tax dollars and grants and the like to force their preferred policies on the whole country and all localities. But now they're essentially doing the same thing here. And if you ask me, it should be up to Orlando city officials how they want to designate their crosswalks. And not everything needs to be federalized, and not everything needs to be part of a culture war. So I think this is a mistake. I think this is a misguided effort that will accomplish very little, but upset a lot of people for no real reason at all. But that's just my take on it. You guys let me know what you think in the comments below. Do make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Hit that like button. And remember, send in your voicemails for my Voicemail Friday episodes where I react to your woke horror stories, give you advice on your personal life scenarios, and answer any questions you guys have for me. The link to send in one of those is, as always, in the description. Now, guys, up next, we're going to talk about a really comical story, at least it's comical to me, about the Democratic Party, because it's like the things that we have been saying for years, critics of kind of woke nonsense and extreme identity politics, it's like they're finally getting it a little bit, at least some of them. So there's this centrist center-left group called Third Way, and they just put out a memo to Democratic candidates telling them to you don't even have to change any of your policies, but stop using this insane woke jargon that no one's ever heard of that makes you sound like a crazy person. Here's a clip from CNN explaining the memo and featuring an executive from the group Third Way discussing it.
Democrats struggle in poll after poll to connect with voters. One center-left think tank is out with a list of words they'd like to see the party cut out of their vocabulary in order to stop President Trump and Republicans in next year's midterm elections. And if Democrats are listening, here's one phrase you wouldn't hear on the campaign trail.
Climate change is the existential threat.
An existential threat to America's labor movement.
Climate crisis is the existential threat.
He loves his word. It's an existential threat. Existential. He has no idea what the hell the word means.
Here now is Matt Bennett. He's co-founder and executive vice president for public affairs for Third Way, the group that published the memo this morning. And I was telling Matt during the break, this pretty much lit up everybody's social media accounts, text messages, group chats around Washington this morning. We've heard existential threat a lot, but I want to give people some context on some other words and phrases that were in this memo. Body shaming, cisgender, holding space, incarcerated people, intersectionality, LGBTQIA+, pregnant people, systems of oppression, the unhoused. Why do you think it's a words, not a policies thing that Democrats are suffering from right now?
Oh, it's definitely both. I mean, we're a think tank. We talk about policies all the time. But I think sometimes we give short shrift to the words that public-facing Democrats, like the ones you just showed, and others, are using. And those words matter a lot. Ask yourself, if you're watching this, does anyone in your family around the table use words like this? Do you hear this when you talk to people that you went to high school with or folks you're talking to at the grocery store? People just don't talk this way. And when Democrats do, they're putting a barrier between themselves and voters in ways that are deeply alienating and really off-putting. And we thought it was time for somebody to tell them that.
So I think this guy makes a really interesting point here that Democratic jargon and this kind of woke speak is just not how normal people speak. It's really not something you encounter in real life unless you are in a college campus or you live in like a deep blue urban enclave, or you work in some kind of HR department or equity field or something like that, this really isn't how normal people speak, whether they are left, right, center, somewhere in between, what have you. So it is very much an alienating way of speaking. Now, some of the pushback has immediately been, oh, well, Democrats don't even say this. It's just activists. And I mean, with some of the more extreme jargon, that might be true, that you don't have a lot of elected officials for the Democrats saying this kind of stuff, but it's just not true at the institutional level and more broadly. I mean, I started covering Democratic politics closely during the 2020 presidential primary, when the different Democratic candidates were all vying for the nomination. You had Elizabeth Warren, you had Bernie Sanders, you had Pete Buttigieg, you had Kamala Harris, you had Kristen Gillibrand, you had others. Cory Booker, and then ultimately it was Joe Biden who got the nomination. And I can tell you almost every single one of these candidates released all sorts of equity-focused, Latinx, incarcerated peoples, all sorts of this stuff in their policy plans. And even the Biden administration, he was perceived at the time as the most moderate of all of those choices. But even the Biden administration went on to embed this kind of DEI language into many of their executive agencies' agendas and policies. And you can go and find all sorts of executive orders and regulations and rules that have all this stuff embedded into it very deeply. So even if they didn't, President Biden wasn't out here saying pregnant person very often in public, when they even let him speak in public, that is. But you can't really deny that this kind of stuff has been thoroughly intertwined with the Democratic Party to its massive detriment. Now, I do agree with the CNN host as well when he's like, but it's not just about the language, it's also about the policies. I've talked about this. There's no messaging that could get people to accept Biden's border policy or Biden's full-throated embrace of child sex changes. Simply using different words isn't going to help you there. But broadly speaking, on many of these issues, the Democratic positions aren't actually as radical or crazy as they sound necessarily, or as unpopular as they sound when you use this ridiculous language. And I want to go through, I read the full memo from Third Way, and I pulled out a couple pieces of it that I think are going underlooked, that are really, I mean, it's just wild this even has to be said. So they talk about therapy speak, and they say, these words say, I'm more empathetic than you, and you are callous to hurting other people's feelings. Privilege, violence, as in environmental violence, dialoguing, othering, triggering, microaggression, progressive stack, centering, holding space, safe space, body shaming. Oh my goodness. From your lips to God's ears, Third Way. If I never have to hear about a microaggression ever again in my life, I will be profoundly grateful to y'all. But the truth is, unfortunately, no one's going to listen, or at least some Democrats might listen, but many won't, because their staffers are rabid ideologues who truly believe all this stuff. And then they're very afraid of the militant activists in the groups, as they are called, who push this stuff. So don't expect a lot of major Democrats to change. More here from Third Way. Gender/orientation correctness. These say, your views on traditional genders and gender roles are at best quaint. And then the examples of words here. Birthing person / inseminated person. Yes, that's actually a real example. Democratic officials started referring to women as the inseminated person in certain contexts. I think regarding like IVF and other stuff. Absolutely insane. Other words here from this list. Pregnant people, chest feeding, cisgender, dead naming, heteronormative, patriarchy, LGBTQIA+. And they write, standing up to MAGA's cruel attacks on gay and transgender people requires creating empathy and building a broad coalition, not confusing or shaming people who would otherwise be allies. Now, while I kind of dispute the idea that MAGA has attacked gay people, I would say that generally that I think is true, that the Democrats or LGBT activists in general do a huge disservice to themselves and their own cause by micro-policing people's language and scolding people and taking everything to this extreme degree, when most people in America, I think, have a generally live and let live approach to these kinds of social issues. When you start saying, oh, well, actually you have to call it chest feeding, or when you get, medical forms saying pregnant people are going to be like, the fuck? Like, normal people, even people who have no issue with gay people, no issue with trans adults living their lives. And if Democrats were smart, they would internalize some of this advice. But again, I remain skeptical. More here from Third Way. They talk about the shifting language of racial constructs. These words signal that talking about race is even more of a minefield. You'll be called out as racist if you do not use the latest and correct terminology. Then they list these words here: Latinx, BIPOC, allyship, intersectionality, minoritized communities. And they say, as we fight racism and discrimination, we should reflect upon whether the words we are using are part of the reason Democrats are losing support from all non-white voter groups. We must know when to take a step back and listen instead of peppering our websites, fundraising asks, and newsletters with sociology buzzwords. Wow. I mean, some people get it, and Latinx is actually a great example for the people who want to say, oh, well, Democratic officials don't even use this. They're just Twitter activists. Then it gets attributed to all Democrats. That is not true. Latinx, Biden and Harris said Latinx too many times to count in tweets, documents, statements. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, who's rebranding himself as like, oh, I'm a moderate dude, says, oh, I'd never even heard Latinx. He said it dozens of times. Dozens. I mean, so this stuff is embedded into Democratic rhetoric, whether they want to admit it or not. And it is so cringe and so alienating that, like they said, minorities don't like it. They find it offensive and condescending and ridiculous. And Democrats have gotten less popular with racial minorities the more they have embraced like woke identity speak. That should tell you something. And it's not something good about that approach to identity issues. One final piece from this Third Way memo, explaining away crime. This language says the criminal is the victim and the victim is an afterthought. Justice involved. Incarcerated people instead of prisoners. Involuntary confinement. And then a Third Way writes, people deserve to feel safe where they live, work, and go to school, and we can't defend the progress we've made on criminal justice reform or hope to make more unless we acknowledge that reality in plain terms. I agree with this. I mean, I am somebody who supports a fair amount of criminal justice reform in many ways, but when you hear progressives speak about these issues, whether it was the whole abolish the police, defund the police debacle, or whether it was, talking about felons who hurt somebody badly and saying, oh, well, that's a justice involved individual, like as in the justice system, is just insane. It strikes most people as totally out of touch. And again, like prioritizing the criminals over the victims, which is not actually, if you were going to have sensible criminal justice reform, you can improve public safety by not wasting resources on stupid things and instead concentrating them where they're needed most. But this kind of woke speak does the cause such a disservice and has really allowed it to be hijacked by radical activists who don't even believe in policing at all. And frankly, any movement like that is never going to be remotely mainstreamed in America. So I thought this memo was really interesting. The splash that it's made online has been fascinating to me as well. I think it's resonating with some people on the center left, but ultimately not with the ones who actually need to hear it. The squad, the progressive Democrats, the new leaders of this party, I don't really, they might drop some of the more extreme buzzwords, but the fundamental thrust of it all, the kind of social justice, activism, and ideology underlying it, I don't think they'll ever give up. But I could be wrong. This time I actually hope I'm wrong, but I don't know. We'll have to see. You guys let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe if you aren't yet, and hit that like button while you're at it. Okay, guys, one final story I want to touch on today, and that is a big announcement coming out of the Trump administration that they plan on taking, on behalf of the U.S. government, 10% of the tech company Intel. Here is Trump speaking about that decision.
One is that Intel, there have been reports that you're considering taking a stake in Intel.
About the 10%?
About the 10%.
Yeah, I met a man. He was a very nice man, and I called for his removal because I saw something by a man named Tom Cotton, a senator from Arkansas. He's a great guy, friend of mine, supporter of mine, big supporter. I'm a supporter of his too. And he wrote a pretty nasty story about the head of Intel. And I said, well, if that's right, he should resign. And he came in, he saw me, we talked for a while. I liked him a lot. I thought he was very good. I thought he was somewhat a victim, but, nobody's a total victim, I guess. And I said, you know what? I think the United States should be given 10% of Intel. And he said, I would consider that. I said, well, I'd like you to do that because Intel has been left behind, as you know, compared to Jensen and some of our friends, NVIDIA, some of the people, and the people because Intel should have never been. Intel was the biggest, most powerful chip company in the world.
I feel like I'm going crazy because Trump explicitly campaigned on the idea that Kamala Harris was like a socialist radical, and she was pretty far to the left. But now we have him literally having government take ownership of the means of production, which is socialist in nature. I mean, it's just 10%. It's a non-voting share. I understand, but it's, to me, just not something that's remotely necessary or a good idea, and just seems like a step backwards. Now, their argument is that, well, we're giving them these billions of dollars of corporate welfare taxpayer subsidies under the CHIPS Act, so we should get something in return. And to that, I would say, no, just stop giving away our money to these massive companies, especially ones that are failing. Intel is a failing company, and now the government is investing in it, giving them billions of dollars and taking stock ownership. What could possibly go wrong, right? I mean, the one thing I have to say about this is I don't think it's like the end of the world. I ultimately think people will blink and forget about this, but I do bristle at it for one, just the kind of core ideological bankruptcy of it all, and then two, I know for a fact that, right, he's being heralded as like, oh, what a good businessman right now. If Obama had done something like this, and he actually did something like this with car manufacturers, but that was just temporary, and at least that was authorized by legislation. There's no actual authorization for Trump doing this. But if a Democrat had done this, Fox News and conservatives would be crying Marxist, communist, socialist. They'd be blaring it as like anti-American and all this stuff, and Trump does it and they're like, great businessman, MAGA. It's stuff like this. Like I said, I don't think it's the end of the world. I don't think it's actually that consequential of a move, but it's the kind of thing that reminds me of the hypocrisy and the total lack of principles, of guiding principles of really either political party at this point, but especially of the political party's media apparatuses, that they really have no values other than their team. And the only criticism I've seen of this on the right has been from outside figures, and it's been pretty muted. And I just know that if a Democrat had done the same exact thing, they would be screaming bloody murder. I would probably be saying the same thing in either case, that I think it's unnecessary and dumb and probably just going to end up being a waste of money. And it's going to actually, Trump talks about like drain the swamp. This kind of thing feeds the swamp because it plays into crony capitalism. So I would be saying it's a mistake either way, but most people in media you will see basically just flip on a dime based on what the party is of the person doing it. And I find that incredibly demoralizing and pathetic. I want to read you guys a thread from the economist Scott Lincecum of the Cato Institute explaining a few reasons why this kind of thing can be harmful from an economic perspective. So he called this a terrible decision that's bad for almost everyone. And here are 6 quick reasons why. Number 1, he says, it's bad for Intel's long-term viability, as politics, not commercial considerations, increasingly decide to drive its decisions. And he notes that state-owned enterprises are notoriously slow, bloated, and unproductive. He also adds that foreign governments may target Intel, like with sanctions and the like. He then concludes as well that this is bad for Intel's competitors, who are suddenly competing against it and Uncle Sam for customers, capital, etc., and not just chip production, because they do a lot of other stuff. He now says that this is bad for Intel's customers, who must also fear and may face pressure to buy Intel's products regardless of their merit. After all, Intel is still struggling to make a top-end chip, and this is bad for the U.S. tech sector overall. He also adds that this is bad for U.S. exports, which is something Trump wants to promote, because sales from Intel, which is now a state-owned enterprise, might be deemed government subsidies by foreign governments, which could then slap countervailing duties, aka more tariffs and levies, on U.S. goods containing Intel's chips, which actually this was the government's position in the U.S. for years. Scott concludes that overall it's a horrendous move that will have real harms for U.S. companies, U.S. tech leadership, and the U.S. economy overall. Hopefully they don't go through with it. Well, they are going through with it. And I don't think it's a great idea. This is not the kind of thing I support. I'm here to tell you that, and I'd be saying the same thing as far as the principles and economics behind it if Biden was doing it. However, the more revealing, beyond the economics of this all, the more revealing thing about this to me is how suddenly you have Democratic elected officials getting on television and saying this is an attack on free market capitalism, as if that's something they have ever cared about. And you have Fox News hosts and Republican politicians cheering this as smart, great leadership and a businessman taking charge, when we all know if a Democrat had done it, they would be screaming Marxism, literally Marxism, all over TV and radio and the halls of Congress. So to me, that's actually the more important reminder and lesson from this, is that basically everyone is a partisan fraud. Sorry to demoralize y'all on this Monday, but that's my takeaway here. You guys let me know. Like, I'm open to you guys having a different perspective on whether it's a good deal or not a good deal. I think it's maybe debatable. Like I said, I don't think it's going to be the end of the world either way, but I do kind of despair in the hypocrisy that moves like this reveal in our media and in our political class. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Hit that like button while you're at it. Make sure you're subscribed. Remember to send in your voicemails for my Voicemail Friday episodes. And we'll talk again real soon.